In San Jose, California, there is a mansion filled with staircases that lead nowhere, doors opening directly into walls, windows built into floors, hidden passages, and hallways designed to confuse anyone walking through them. And according to legend, the woman who built it believed she was being haunted by the dead. The Winchester Mystery House became one of America's most famous paranormal stories because it feels less like a home and more like a maze, designed by someone slowly losing trust in reality itself. But before it became a tourist attraction, before the ghost stories, before the endless documentaries and paranormal investigations, there was Sarah Winchester, and her story is far stranger than many people realize. The story begins with tragedy. Sarah Lockwood Pardee was born into a wealthy family and received an unusually strong education for a woman of her era. She was intelligent, well-read, spoke multiple languages, played music, and, by all accounts, seemed destined for a comfortable life. She eventually married William Wirt Winchester, the heir to the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. At the time, the Winchester rifle was becoming one of the most recognizable firearms in America. Its impact on American history would be enormous, and so would the fortune it generated. For a while, Sarah's life appeared ideal. Then everything began falling apart. In 1866, her infant daughter Annie died from a childhood illness. The child was only a few weeks old. Sarah never fully recovered from the loss. For years afterward, friends described her as deeply affected by grief. Then tragedy struck again. In 1881, her husband, William, died from tuberculosis. Within a relatively short period of time, Sarah lost both her child and her husband, the two most important people in her life. Suddenly, she inherited an enormous fortune, millions of dollars, along with a significant ownership stake in the Winchester Company. By modern standards, Sarah became incredibly wealthy. But wealth doesn't protect people from grief. And according to the legend that would later surround her life, it may have made things worse. Over time, stories began spreading that Sarah visited a spiritual medium seeking answers about the tragedy surrounding her life. The late 19th century was the height of spiritualism in America. Seances were popular. Mediums attracted huge audiences. Many people genuinely believed communication with the dead was possible. It's important to remember that this wasn't considered fringe by everyone at the time. Millions of people took these ideas seriously, especially those dealing with profound loss. And according to the famous story, the medium told Sarah something horrifying. The spirits of people killed by Winchester rifles were following her, and if she wished to survive, she would need to continue building forever. Whether that conversation actually happened remains uncertain. Historians debate how much of the story is true, but what happened next is undeniable. Sarah moved west. In 1886, she purchased an unfinished farmhouse in California, and over the following decades, she transformed it into something almost impossible to describe. Construction reportedly continued for nearly 40 years. Workers arrived daily. Rooms were added, hallways expanded, new sections appeared, old sections disappeared. Entire areas were redesigned repeatedly. The house never seemed finished. It was as though completion itself was the one thing Sarah wanted to avoid. Visitors who entered the mansion often struggled to understand its layout, because the building ignored many of the rules people expect houses to follow. Stairs rise into ceilings, doors open directly into walls, windows face other rooms, windows appear in floors, hallways end abruptly. Some doors open into dangerous drops, others lead nowhere at all. At first glance, the architecture almost feels like a joke, but after enough time inside the house, the effect changes. The building begins feeling strangely disorienting, as if it operates according to its own private logic. And according to paranormal legends, that was intentional. Many people came to believe Sarah designed the mansion to confuse spirits. The idea was simple. Ghosts following her through the house would become lost, trapped, unable to find her. Again, historians question whether Sarah ever actually believed this, but the legends became inseparable from the house itself. Adding to the mystery were Sarah's reported obsessions with certain numbers, most famously the number 13. Throughout the mansion, visitors can find repeated appearances of the number: 13 windows, 13 panels, 13 hooks, 13 steps. Whether this reflected superstition, personal preference, or simple coincidence remains debated. But details like these only fueled public fascination. And then came 1906, one of the most devastating earthquakes in California history. The San Francisco earthquake caused massive destruction throughout the region. The Winchester house suffered significant damage. Several sections collapsed. Parts of the mansion became unsafe after the earthquake. Sarah reportedly ordered some damaged rooms sealed permanently, doors closed, passageways blocked, entire sections abandoned. And almost immediately, rumors began spreading. What exactly was inside those rooms? Why seal them forever? What was she trying to hide? The reality was probably much less dramatic. Structural damage alone would explain much of the decision, but mystery has a way of filling empty spaces, and the Winchester house contained plenty of empty spaces. Over time, stories multiplied. Visitors claimed they heard footsteps in empty hallways, whispering voices, doors opening by themselves, cold spots appearing without explanation. Staff members occasionally reported unusual experiences. Paranormal investigators became fascinated by the mansion, and eventually the house developed a reputation as one of the most haunted locations in America. Some visitors claim to have seen shadowy figures moving through distant rooms. Others describe hearing breathing nearby despite being alone. A few reported sensations of being watched, especially in sections of the house where the architecture becomes increasingly confusing. Now, realistically, places like Winchester Mystery House possess a powerful psychological advantage. The environment itself creates unease. Humans naturally seek patterns. We want spaces to make sense. We expect hallways to lead somewhere, doors to open into rooms, stairs to take us to destinations. The Winchester house constantly violates those expectations. And when people became disoriented, they often become more sensitive to sounds, shadows, and unusual experiences. That doesn't prove ghosts, but it does help explain why so many visitors leave feeling unsettled. Modern historians also challenged many of the popular stories surrounding Sarah Winchester. Some argued that the image of a terrified widow desperately building to escape spirits was largely created after her death. Sensational newspaper stories sold better than reality. And a haunted mansion attracts far more attention than a wealthy woman repeatedly renovating her home. In fact, some historians suggest Sarah may have simply enjoyed architecture, experimentation, design, construction. The mansion may have been less a monument to fear and more a never-ending creative project. I think the reason Winchester Mystery House became so famous has less to do with whether ghosts were real and more to do with what the building represents. Because when people walk through those hallways, they aren't just seeing unusual architecture, they're seeing grief made physical, a structure built over decades by someone who experienced unimaginable loss. Room after room, hallway after hallway, always building, always changing, never finished. There's something deeply human about that. The desire to stay busy, to keep moving, to keep creating. Because stopping means sitting alone with memories. And maybe that's why the house continues disturbing people today. Not because it proves ghosts exist, but because every staircase leading nowhere, every sealed room, every hallway that suddenly ends, feels like evidence of a mind trying desperately to outrun something it could never fully escape. Grief, guilt, fear, or maybe all three. Sarah Winchester died in 1922. Construction stopped almost immediately. For the first time in decades, the sound of hammers disappeared. The workers left. The additions ended. The house was finally finished. Or perhaps more accurately, it was finally abandoned by the person who had spent a lifetime trying to complete it. Today, millions of visitors have walked through its corridors, searching for ghosts, searching for answers, trying to understand the woman who built it. And maybe that's the real mystery. Not whether Sarah Winchester was haunted by spirits, but whether she spent 40 years building a maze to escape the dead or to escape her own sorrow. Because somewhere inside that endless labyrinth of rooms, Sarah Winchester kept building until the day she died. And even now, the house still feels like it's waiting for something.